What's up, folks? This is Clay with the Clayway here in Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Michigan, and we're going to talk about fuel mileage in your automobile and how to get more. First off, I'm going to recommend not driving for 2 weeks to kind of flatten the curve, which probably will turn out to be 2 years and $12 a gallon. Next, in all seriousness, we're going to talk about how to actually do this. And we're going to first talk about drag and how drag affects fuel economy in your automobile. So my idea in this video is to do some simple practical things that you folks can do at home. Some of it's going to be redundant and people are already going to know exactly what it is, but some of it's going to get into a little bit more complicated things, and we're going to discuss how you can get it done as well. Drag from tire pressure will not allow the car to move as freely as it would if the tires are aired up properly. There's two different locations to find the proper air pressure, and the most recommended location is on the sidewall of your tire. It's going to be on here somewhere. Oftentimes you're going to find this label right here, and it's going to describe to you what the tire pressure should be. So this tire is supposed to be 44 psi. That's definitely not 44 psi. So we're wasting fuel, because it's taking more energy from the engine to move this vehicle. So we're going to straighten that out. Then we're going to go on to some other simpler things that you can do at home as well. Now we can check a couple things underneath the hood, like the air filter and the oil. If you have a dirty or clogged air filter, it's not necessarily going to turn on your check engine light. It's going to restrict the amount of air that flows in the engine, which will create rich and fuel lean scenarios in your ECM. Right now, we're going to check out the air filter. The air filter is usually located in a larger plastic box, and you're going to see either some screws or like in this situation, some little flaps that you can pick up, and you can pull that back and then pull your air filter out. These are usually designed so people at home can get them. We're also going to check our engine oil level. The engine oil level is not only important to the life of the engine, but it's also important how well it's lubricated to restrict the engine from not functioning properly. And if you have a low engine oil level, your engine is having to work harder to produce the amount of energy and momentum it takes to move the vehicle. So having your engine oil level correct and changed is extremely important. So now we're going to talk about check engine lights and how they affect your fuel economy. We're even going to talk about how heaters, you're like, what? Heaters? How could my heater have anything to do with my fuel economy? Well, I'm going to show you something, and it's not that air conditioning makes your fuel economy less, even though it does, because your compressor puts a strain on the engine, which then in turn lessens your fuel economy. I'm going to talk about heaters. Okay, so back in the day, back like 2012, vehicles' heating systems were controlled by vacuum. The engine creates vacuum when it runs, and it controls things like the brake booster. So if you've ever tried to push your brake when the engine is off, it's really hard to push. But when you start the engine up, it pushes easily. And that's because there's a hose that runs from the engine, because your engine is a big vacuum pump, and it creates pressure that allows you to push that brake pedal down. It also creates vacuum to the heating system, and when there's a vacuum leak, it changes the inside dynamics of the ECM because your O2 sensors read that pressure. They say, okay, we've got this much air coming in, and we need to mix this much fuel. So when you have a vacuum leak and your air conditioner or your heating system is not working correctly, it can cause a strain on the engine, which will cause you to get less fuel mileage. And sometimes will come up as a O2 sensor code when you really don't even have anything wrong with your O2 sensors. It's a vacuum leak. So that's important to have your mechanic check out. Obviously, you can watch my videos and learn about stuff like that in the future. But for right now, this is just a video to talk to you about how to get better gas mileage and hopefully stay away from build back bonkers. Now, most every single vehicle, and by law, they're required to have these tags that tell you where the vacuum is and what kind of vacuum lines it should have. So you need to look underneath the hood of an automobile and you'll be able to find that, and you can count the hoses and stuff like that. But what about if you don't know where a vacuum leak is, or if you have one? For this portion of the video, I got to throw in a disclaimer. I can't help it if you catch your car on fire because you don't know what the heck you're doing. So if you have an old car that has spark plug wires on it and not coilovers like the top of this one, you could catch it on fire if you have a broken spark plug wire and it's arcing sparks. So keep a fire extinguisher handy when you try this out. Now with the engine on and running, we're gonna take some brake cleaner. This is my first laid. At least that's the way I read it the first time I seen it. When we're checking for vacuum leaks, we're spraying around areas that can suck in air, because if they can suck in air, they can also suck in fuel. Generally, this occurs around the intake. It'll be sucking in air or a broken vacuum hose. As you spray the brake cleaner around the intake, you will notice a noticeable difference in the RPM level of the engine. It will change as it sucks it inside there. Now, a check engine light can seriously degrade your fuel economy. Anytime you turn on your automobile, your check engine light should illuminate. If your check engine light does not illuminate when you turn on the automobile, that's probably because somebody's blocked it or took it out. Meaning that when the vehicle starts up, they should go off. Now we're gonna take a live shot of what happens when your check engine light's on, and if your O2 sensors are bad, or if you have a intake leak or something like that. Now when our engine is running properly, we have this spike on our number one oxygen sensor. But when it's running correctly and everything's working and we don't have a check engine light on, we should have a nice rhythmic groove, meaning that the ECM is constantly sending in more fuel, sending in more air, sending in more fuel, sending in more air. So that's why the wave does this, because the engine's always compensating for that. And then down here on our second O2 sensor, which is considered B1 S2, it's doing the same thing. It's saying, hey, I've got too much fuel, or hey, I've got too much air. And the engine compensates by giving it more air and giving it more fuel, depending on what it needs. So let's say that your engine isn't working properly. Maybe there's an air leak like we were talking about, or you have a drippy injector inside it. This first sensor is going to register that. And then when it goes through your catalytic converter, it's going to communicate that to the other oxygen sensor. Then that oxygen sensor is going to go back and talk to our computer and say, hey, you need to adjust for this. So if your catalytic converter is plugged up, and you've ran your engine with like bad coils and misfires for a long time. No, I don't actually have any real catalytic converters because I sold them all because they're worth a lot of money. Any that were laying around are gone. I need it to be able to pay for $5 a gallon in gas. It's going to destroy this catalytic converter, and it's going to make it chew up so much fuel because the engine constantly thinks that something's going on that's not really going on, and you're going to be out a ton of money, and there's going to be no build back Bonkers for you. Now, all engines have what's called a Pcv system, which stands for positive crankcase ventilation. They work differently on cars nowadays than they used to in the past. They used to in the past just be a little like ball and flicker type thing, but if that goes bad, it can cause excessive fuel usage as well. You can often check to see if your Pcv system is plugged by simply removing your oil cap. If you go in while the engine is running and you remove your oil cap and you have that kind of noise coming out of there, well, your Pcv system is not working quite as well as it should. This type of scenario, when you have air pushing out of there in a great amount, is a bad problem, not only for fuel economy, but also for your engine seals. It can create an engine seal leak, like a rear main, which means you have to pull your motor out. So addressing this problem is something you should probably do rather quickly. So, if this video was helpful, please consider subscribing, clicking the notifications, pushing that join button, because that's how we'll be able to build a hydrogen electric motor at some point, or engine, or hydrogen producing apparatus. I've been wanting to do it forever, but between working on cars and making videos, I don't have the time. Remember, no matter what it is in life, if anyone else can do it, I promise you, you can do it too. Don't be the very next to them. Be the absolute first of you. God bless, folks. Have the best of it.